So my name is Vanessa Aegirsdottir. I live in Whitehorse, Yukon, which is part of Canada. We neighbor Alaska.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Herstory TV and the Herstory podcast. This is Gertrude Matcha here in beautiful Wellington, New Zealand. And yes, I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating lady coming to us all the way from Alaska this time. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Sure thing. So my name is Vanessa Aegirsdottir. I live in Whitehorse, Yukon, which is part of Canada. We neighbor Alaska. And I'm 44 years old. I am divorced and I'm married now to a wonderful man who is the main reason why my business is the way that it is. So in my business, I am a textile artist and jewelry designer. I specialize in using materials that are sourced locally, naturally colored, and I make everything by hand. I have a physical store in downtown Whitehorse, Yukon. And of course, like most folks, I definitely have an online store as well. And COVID has challenged me to really accelerate some of my bigger plans for the business. And I'm reaching a bigger audience because if not now, then when? So I've had to get really excited about things, even if I'm nervous about them, and really challenge myself to try and do the things that I'm not sure will work and just go find out for sure if they will or not.
Wow. What a fascinating career and a fascinating opportunity you have right now. You're right. COVID is forcing every entrepreneur under the sun to be creative, to find different ways of doing things. So let's talk a little bit about the product and what it is that you make.
Sure thing. So in my store, like I say, I'm a textile artist and a jewelry designer. So the store has almost like two main product lines. So the textile work, it's hand spun, hand woven yarns, tapestries, and things that can be made with wool. And then the other product that gets the most attention is the jewelry collection that's made with indigenous sourced wild Yukon fur. And it's harvested on the land. It's all wild. It's, and Canada's fur trade is controlled by some really high standards of practice. The traps are humane. There's, the stories that exist out there about, the blood and gore and the misinformation is highly inaccurate. What we do, by working with indigenous trappers, there's an extra layer of care and attention to the practice, in addition to what the government insists that we do. Mm-hmm. There's tradition and there's prayer and there's ceremony and there's thoughtfulness and humility and gratitude. It's not just a job. It's much, much richer than that. And so for me, it's a privilege to get to do that work. One of the most important things I think that my husband, who is Tlingit, and he's our main trapper, one of the things that he's taught me is that when you're wearing fur, you are forever in relationship with that animal. So for us to harvest those furs in a good way is important, so that when the wearer has those pieces in their life and on their bodies, they have a positive relationship with that animal. And it's the belief that these animals give themselves. And so when we regard them as a gift, it really changes our attitude about what we're working with and how we treat those things and how we care for them.
Wow. There's a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions about the fur industry, and especially indigenous communities all over the world. Living here in New Zealand, I'm exposed to the Maori communities, the Aboriginal communities in Australia, and we're all kind of sharing a common history of colonialism and the impact that has done to communities worldwide. So in your work in decolonizing what has happened, give us a few examples of the stories you come up against, the issues that you're addressing right now.
I think with the thing that makes our business so different from every other fur business that I know of existing in Canada, that's operating on a bigger commercial scale beyond just like the indigenous handcrafters and the individual makers, what we've deliberately done differently in our business is we aren't buying the furs from the auction houses. The auction house while it's a traditional system that's existed in Canada as a means for fur harvesters to get their furs to market, it's existed for a really long time. It also serves to oppress a lot of the trappers. And when you have a trapper, who's Indigenous, they're not doing it as, to make a bunch of money. They're doing it to stay connected to the land and to honor these traditional teachings and a practice that was carried out by generations before them, to make sure that that knowledge isn't lost. Then for me to be able to work with those trappers and buy fur directly from them, it takes them out of this really dysfunctional um, um, supply chain that puts the power, typically with all industries, in the hand of the final user. Agriculture is the same way. And so for me to be able to provide a way for harvesters to sell their fur directly to me, I'm not paying the lowest price. I'm not negotiating to pay them less. I'm actually working with them to pay them more, so that their fur practice is not just sustainable, but also profitable. And profit is sort of a dirty word in so many industries, especially when it's something that's so rich in culture and there's a lot of emotional attachment to it. It's as though we are supposed to be martyrs and give up everything just for the preservation of the practice. But I think it's actually possible, and we're proving that it is, for something that is that important to also be something that folks can make money at. And so I'll give you an example. When a fur harvester is sending their furs out to the auction house, it's on a consignment basis. So they sign their furs out, off they go, and it's bundled up together and it's bid upon. And if the furs don't go for a price that the trapper is happy with, he's not in a position to decline the offer. So they've given up their power. And for an Indigenous trapper, that, I think the implications of that are far, far greater than for the non-Indigenous trapper. And so say, for example, a lynx pelt. There was a time where lynx pelts were selling at auction for $25 a skin. And they're not tanned or anything. That all happens later on in the process. I actually timed it out. When I go out with my husband, and so the two of us go together, and we happen to have a very accessible trap line. It's easy for us to get there. We drive and we take snowmobiles and that sort of thing. And I timed, if we were to leave from our front door, run all the 180 kilometers of trap line, come home and skin out, if we only ever got one lynx, it's 15 hours per person for that whole circuit to prepare one lynx to be ready to send theoretically to auction. So 30 hours of skilled work, high risk work. Sometimes we're out there at -20, -30, so there's like an element of danger as well. That's worth an awful lot more than $25 to me in the work alone, never mind the value of the life of that animal, which, as I said before, we regard as a gift. It's so precious. So, I mean, it's impossible to put a price tag on the value of a life, but in that context where it is a commodity, the best I can do is to offer trappers as much as possible. And so instead of the $25 at auction, I'm giving them, usually around $300.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is a big difference.
And they know the price at the beginning of the season. So then they can make informed decisions about which furs they want to target based on what sorts of furs are available on their trap line and their ability and the skills and tools that they have available to them, instead of just getting what they get and sending it to auction and hoping it sells for not a terrible price.
Wow. Wow. Now, how many other people in Canada are doing something similar? Are you a minority on this path? Are you connecting with other people who think the same?
I'm always connecting with people. I think what we're seeing in Canada is, after the Truth and Reconciliation Commission did all of their work, and they came up with the findings and the recommendations for Canadians to enact acts of reconciliation. I think one of the wonderful byproducts of that is that there is a huge increase in the demand for authentic, handcrafted Indigenous goods. And so there's a lot of Indigenous makers, and they're benefiting from that. I occupy a slightly different space because I'm not Indigenous to this area. My husband works in education, and he always asks people in the classroom, children and teachers, he says, who in this room is Indigenous? And usually the First Nations kids raise their hands, and he looks and he says, everybody in this room is Indigenous. So that's something else for me to remember, is that, yes, I live here, but I'm a guest on this land. And that's part of, how I can build bridges between understanding my place and where I am and whose land this is, whose furs these are, what knowledge is being made available to me. There's some things that I have the honor of having shared with me that are just for me, and I'm not allowed to share those.
Mhm.
But to get back to your question about who else in Canada is doing this, aside from Indigenous makers, I don't know of anyone who is operating under a similar model of offering as much money as possible to the trappers. Now, granted, I'm making a really small physical product, and typically in most product-based industries, the smaller the product, the higher the margin. If you're looking at a fur coat, you're not going to have the same margins that I have. And so I am in a unique but very, very lucky position that I
Yeah.
can share the wealth a bit. And that's something else that I've learned from my husband's culture. In the potlatches where they celebrate, there'll be a clan will host one of these potlatches and they'll give away almost everything. And so they operate on this principle of redistribution of wealth. And so I think
Mhm.
that's one of the most beautiful parts of that culture where, that we in our family, we say the tide raises all ships.
Oh,
And so if I'm doing well, everyone else has to come with me. Otherwise, I don't want to be doing well by myself. That's no fun. So if I can share that, then I'm also, with my business hat on, I'm thinking I'm securing my supply.
yeah.
If I'm providing these trappers with a really good income and affording them the opportunity to accept or decline because they're in a position of power now to say, yes, I like your price, or no, I don't. I think we're building respect, and I think that's the only way that a business can thrive is if you have a healthy supply chain of folks who feel respected and valued because they are respected and valued.
Yeah, that is absolutely priceless. Now, with the state the world is in right now, with COVID, a lot of companies, a lot of businesses have been affected. Were you always selling online? How have you coped with the changing world we're living in right now?
Some days better than others. Um, that's the real answer. In the beginning, I think everybody was really, really scared. I'm lucky to live in a place where we've almost achieved herd immunity with our vaccine distribution. And, it's a big day if we have like 2 or 3 cases. I think we have 1 case currently, so we're quite insulated here. We're very, very safe, and we're benefiting from that. But having said that, our borders to our territory have been closed and we don't have any tourism, and this little community relies quite heavily on that, and my business is no exception.
Yes.
So I have always had a website, but it wasn't very good.
Okay. Okay.
And my online store actually crashed on my birthday last year, which was about 10 days into the shutdown. And so after I had a small crying jag / meltdown, I put on my big girl pants and I sat down and I fixed my website. And so since then, I've taken advantage of some projects some funding projects that our local government has made available, and gotten opportunities to have some funding come in and work with some professionals to help me with some of the components of my marketing plan. So in
Right.
addition to having the website rebuilt and functioning properly, I was also able to start doing some work with influencers on Instagram. I was
Wow.
doing some pitches to magazines. And so since COVID started, our business has grown. There was a point where 70% of the revenue was coming from the website. And like I say, because we're a little bit insulated here, our restrictions are pretty relaxed. So the physical store opened up quite early on.
Okay.
And so in doing that, then I obviously saw the transition in the sales from the web store to the foot traffic through the physical store. But we've experienced an increase in sales. We've grown, and since the pandemic began, we've been published in Esquire Mexico, Vogue Japan, and I've just secured 2 international pop-ups, one with a store in New York City and one in Switzerland.
Wow. Wow. That is just incredible. Exciting too, right?
It really is. And these were things that I would have been too chicken to go for
Oh,
before, because I
yes.
was kind of scared of my own potential. And now I figured, well, I've got nothing to lose. It's, I have 2 sons, and they're 17 and 22. And my 22-year-old is too wise for his own good. He said to me one day, Mom, if you can't get out of it, you better get into it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, our children come to teach us, right? They come
We
to
do.
show us those things that we are so frightened of exploring. I just absolutely love your story. It is just so, so inspiring to see what you've done with this brand. And I'm hoping that we will feature some of these earrings and your jewelry pieces in our magazine. We are also looking for people who have businesses that have a social conscience.
Mhm.
For me, that's really important, that in whatever we do as entrepreneurs and business people, we are doing it with an awareness and a presence that takes into consideration those around us. And we use the resources we're getting respectively. You know, I love the fact that you honor the animals and you realize that they are a gift. They're gifting themselves to us. That's just so beautiful to hear. Wow. So, if time was an illusion and you could go back to the younger you when you started this business, based on what life has taught you up to this point, it could be a young entrepreneur who's online fumbling, a young jeweler, a young textile designer, not knowing where to go, how to start. What 3 nuggets of wisdom would you give them?
Oh, just 3. Okay. The first one, I would say that whatever they are thinking about you is none of your damn business. You just focus on you. You can't control what they're thinking or doing anyway, so never mind them. You have plenty to think about right here with you. I would start with that. Second, I would say that with whatever your product or service is, try and be as objective as possible, especially when it comes to your pricing structure. Don't gauge any of it against what you yourself would pay for, because you are probably not your target market. That was something that was told to me when I was in my 20s. I've been self-employed since high school, and so that one has stayed with me for a very long time.
It's almost as if you, sorry, I just need to reiterate that one. Sometimes we don't know our value and we assess it based on what we know. Yet somebody else can look at you and see the value much, much higher than it actually is, right?
Mhm.
I love that. Sorry, the third one.
The third one, it kind of connects to that a little bit as well. I think the third one would be just do it anyway. Don't
Otherwise,
let
you're lifting
fear,
your head, right?
yeah, don't let fear control you. The what ifs, yeah, you know what? What if? You know, what if you fail? What if you succeed? Go find out. Do it anyway.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful way to end our interview. Thank you so much, Vanessa,
Oh,
for
thank you for
gracing us
having
with
me.
your presence all the way from Canada slash Alaska. Alaska stuck in my head for some reason. I forgot
We're
Alaska's in
neighbors.
the US.
We're neighbors. We all have snow still.
I love that. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. Yet another fascinating story from another part of the world. I am so juiced up and excited about what's coming with the Herstory Circle. Tune in again tomorrow because I will have yet another amazing woman sharing her story from a different part of the world. Have a fantastic evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Bye for now. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks. See you.